Hey now folks, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl. Welcome to my 100th video. Now what I mean by that is it's not my 100th review, it's my actual video number 100 on my channel. And I've done a lot of different types of videos. Some of them are just silly little one-offs like the video I did with Bugbear. I did a couple of really brief Kickstarter updates in addition to my longer ones. I did my Board Game Geek Secret Santa thing. There's unboxing, top 10 lists. So there's a lot of different games, but it's a lot of different videos. But it's very important to me that this is number 100 on my channel. And just recently, actually on my birthday, I reached over 1,000 subscribers, which is huge. Thank you so much for subscribing and tuning into my videos. I know a lot of other video reviewers have thousands and thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of more subscribers than me, but it's very important to me that I have as many as I have, and I cherish every single one of you. I really mean that. So this is actually a video review, despite all of my jabbering right there. And in honor of my 100th video, I wanted to do my current favorite game. And you already know what it is if you look at the title of this video, but I play a lot of different games. It's possible this won't be my favorite game because my tastes change so much and so dramatically from month to month with all the different games that I play. But even if it gets dethroned this year from all the games that are on the horizon, it will still be in my top 10 and probably my top 5. That's how much I love it. And I am talking about Seasons from Asmodee. This is a fantastic game. So this is going to be one of those reviews where you already know what I think before we get to the end. But what I will tell you is that it is a competitive game where each player takes control of a powerful wizard and they're all involved in a 3-year-long competition to see who is the best wizard by accumulating the most crystals, which are points, but also currency in the game, which you're going to use together with mana tokens to cast powerful spells and cast artifacts and familiars and try to use them in such a way that you get more points than your opponent and sometimes even attack your opponents. Like I said, I'm already telling you right up front, I love this game, but let me give you an overview of the game, then we'll come back and I'll tell you exactly why I love it so much. Okay folks, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of Seasons. It's actually not too complex a game, but there are a lot of little details, so I might not hit every single one of them. Now, the theme of the game is that you're all powerful wizards. This game is for 2 to 4 players, and you're in a 3-year-long competition to gain the most prestige points amongst all of the other wizards. And prestige points are a mixture of the actual prestige points on cards that you play, but also crystals that you accumulate during the course of the game. You'll add all those up together, and that is your final victory point tally at the end of 3 years. Now, let's go over the components. Each player gets a different colored component board. They're all the same, just different colors and different imagery. Each player gets 4 of these little cubes in their color. 2 of them will keep track of different things on your player board. 2 of them go on the crystal track. Now, the crystal track is where during the course of the game, you'll keep track of your crystals, which at the end are victory points. But during the game, this will ebb and flow because you actually spend crystals to fuel some of your power cards, which is this stack right here. All the cards in this stack are collectively called power cards, but they are broken up into different types, which we will get to. Out here are the energy tokens. Energy tokens represent the different elements. You have wind, fire, earth, and water, and you're going to use those as well to fuel your spells. And the center board here is possibly the crux of the game, and that is the seasons wheel. So this keeps track of all the different seasons. You have winter, spring, summer, and fall. And it also keeps track of the years, which you'll see here. All this stuff in the inner ring has to deal with transmutation or transmuting crystals, which I'll also cover in a moment. And possibly the most impressive as far as components go part of the game are these dice. There are 5 total dice for each season of the year, but you may not use all of them. It depends on the number of players. You use a number of dice equals the number of players plus 1. So, how do you actually play the game? The very first thing you do after everyone gets their player boards and their pieces is you card draft. Each player is going to be dealt 9 cards from this deck of power cards here. Each player will get those 9 cards, and in typical card drafting fashion, if you're not familiar with card drafting, each player chooses one of those cards in secret, puts it face down in front of them, passes the 8 remaining cards to the next player in line. And you're going to keep doing this essentially until each player has a brand new hand of 9 cards. So like in other card drafting games, you have to decide which card you want to take. You have to possibly pass up another card you would really like and hope that it gets back around to you. If it doesn't, you're going to have to deal with that. Now, what are these cards? Now, like I said, all the power cards are broken down into different types. They're all collectively called power cards for terminology in the game, but there's 2 broad categories. The first are familiars, and familiars all have sort of an orangish border and background to them. And thematically, they're all different types of animals and familiars that you as wizards can take control of. But the breakdown of the different cards are all the same, even for the other type of cards, which are the magic items, which have more of a purplish background border to them. While they're different thematically and different things affect familiars as opposed to magic items, the breakdown of the card mechanics are all the same. Up at the top, we have the name, we have the picture. This number up in the corner is prestige points. If you have this card in play at the end of the game, you're going to get that many points towards earning your victory. Underneath the picture is the cost of the card. So you need to, when you try to cast this card, you need to expend these different types of mana tokens, and different cards have different types of costs. Now, this needs fire tokens, but it's dependent on the number of players, 2, 3, or 4. Some of them require crystals. So, for instance, the Runic Cube of Aeolus there's this little crystal symbol. It's hard to see, but it has a little 20 in it. So you need to expend 20 crystals, which are essentially victory points at the end of the game. So and then after the cost, you have the different special effects that they all do. Now, there's another little symbol down here, which will give you an indicator as to how this effect is going to work. For this card, the Demon of Argos, this symbol with the little arrow pointing down means that as soon as you play this card, the effect happens and that's it. It just sort of sits there like a lump. As long as it stays out there, it'll be worth victory points, but unless it goes back to your hand and you cast it again, you're not going to be able to get that ability again. Whereas Titus Deep Gaze has this little circular arrow here, which means that his ability is always on. And if its effect applies, it will always work. And there's other ones as well, including this little gear symbol, which on one of the magic items, means that in order to use this ability, you tap it, or they can't use the word tap, but turn it sideways and use its ability. But that means that you can't use it again until the start of the next round when it's unturned sideways, untaps. So those are the different types of timing effects. Now, what do? Let's go back to the familiars. The Demon of Argos says that when you use this card, you reduce the summoning gauge of all your opponents by 1. Each of your opponents draws a power card. I'll explain all that in a little bit. Titus Deep Gaze, at the end of your round, your opponents give you a crystal, and if an opponent was unable to give a crystal to you, you have to sacrifice him. In other words, you put him in the discard pile. Amsug Longneck is going to make every player, including yourself, take a magic item back to your hand, which actually could be good because it allows you to recast that item and potentially get a one-time effect use again. Lewis Greyface will copy all of the energy tokens that another opponent has. And Silas the Faithful is going to make each opponent sacrifice a different power card. Now, notice it says power card, so it could be either a familiar or a magic item. Some of the magic items. The Runic Cube of Aeolus is very simple. It costs you 20 crystals. It has no special abilities, but it's worth 30 prestige points at the end of the game. You may not want to sacrifice 20 crystals just to get a net gain of 10, but if you can find other more unique ways to cast this card through other card effects, that could be very, very good for the end. The Die of Malice is going to allow you to re-roll a die, and we haven't covered that yet, and potentially get another effect if you're not happy with what you got. The Temporal Boots is going to move the season track backwards or forwards 3. The Hourglass of Time is incredibly powerful and gives you an energy token at the start of every new season. And the Amulet of Water, as a one-time effect, will give you energy tokens of your choice. So you're going to draft all of these cards. When you have a new hand that you like, you're going to actually put them into different brackets. So you will have these tokens that say either 2 or 3 on them. The reason for this is that at the start of the first year, the beginning of the game, you're going to have access to 3 of the 9 cards that you drafted. But you don't get access to the other 6 until you get to the second and then the third year. So you'll take another 3 cards, put this number 2 token on them, put them to the side, and then you're going to take the last 3 cards, put the number 3 token on them, and put them to the side. You can never put those cards into your hand or swap them out prematurely, but you can always look at them. And the goal here is to plan it out. So in the beginning, you want easy to cast cards, and you're going to want cards that give you increasing resources over the course of 3 years. And in the final year, you kind of want cards that are possibly hard to cast, but might be worth a lot of points. Maybe they don't have a continuous effect, so they're not useful, but at the end, when you're scrambling for points, they might be a good thing to play. It's all about the strategy of how you want to do it. You have that option. So let's talk about, after you do the drafting, what all of this other stuff means that I referenced when I was reading the card abilities. Now, on your player board, there's a few different things here. At the top, you see these little grooves that are numbered 1 through 7. Actually, they're numbered 1 through 6, and then there's a little max symbol indicating that you can only have 7 energy tokens in your reserve. This represents your reserve. So you will have your player board down here, and when you gain tokens, you'll put them into these little slots. And when you have 7, you can't have any more. If you would gain more tokens once you already have 7, then you have to decide which ones to discard and which ones to keep. Now, right underneath that are your summoning gauge. You can only have a number of cards in play, whether it's familiars or magic items, equal to your summoning gauge. At the beginning, everyone's going to start at 0. You'll have your little cube, and you'll put it on the 0. But you may have more. Once you have at least 1 or 2, you're going to be able to put more cards into play. If you ever go down after you've already got a certain amount of cards in play, let's say you have 3 cards in play, you're at 3, someone does an effect that makes you lose a summoning gauge like the Demon of Argos that I showed you, you still get to keep those cards in play, but you can't put more into play until you raise it past 3. Underneath that, these are special little bonuses, wizard bonuses that you can gain during the course of the game. You'll put one of your little cubes on the 0 here, indicating that you have not used any bonuses. During the course of the game, you can use a bonus up to 3 times, but you see here that you're going to take negative points each time you use one of those bonuses. Use a bonus once, it's negative 5 points. Use another bonus, it's negative 12 points, and so on. You have 4 different bonuses to choose from. You can double up on them if you want. You can use the same bonus 3 times. Doesn't really matter, and I think you could even use all 3 in the same round if you really wanted to. And they all do different things. The first one's going to let you take 2 energy tokens from your reserve and transmute them into any other 2 energy tokens that you want. You can even keep one the same if you just want to transmute 1. The next ability is that if you have the capability to it gives you the capability to transmute crystals or transmute energy tokens into crystals, victory points, and currency during your turn. And for each one of those you transmute, you get +1 crystal, and we'll cover that a little bit more in a moment. The next bonus very simply gives you +1 to your summoning gauge, which can be very helpful if you really need to play a card, but you don't have the summoning gauge for it. The last one, some of the dice effects will let you draw a card. If you use this bonus, when you draw a card, instead of just drawing a card straight off the top of the deck and choosing whether to keep it or not, you get to draw 2 cards, choose one of those, and potentially keep it. So that could be very useful. I should mention that this little hole over here, a lot of people use it as a dice holder, but it actually becomes relevant with the expansion to the game, that you actually put something there. So, but that's beyond the scope of this overview. Now, let's talk about those dice I keep referencing and the different special abilities. Like I said, there's a season track here, and you're going to keep track of the season track with, you'll put 1 cube there in the middle, which indicates the year, so you start off in year 1, and you always start off in winter, and each season is broken into 3 different steps, 1, 2, and 3. And at the beginning of the turn, you'll decide who's going to go first. Whoever the first player is, and that will pass every round clockwise, has to roll the dice for that season. So if you're in winter, you're going to roll all of the dice. And again, that dice is going to be variable based on the number of players. But you'll roll all the dice, and then you're going to draft the dice the same way that you drafted the cards. Starting with the first player, whoever rolled it is going to choose one of those dice, and then it's going to go around to all the other players. Once every player has picked their dice, it goes back to the first player for the rounds, and then you take the effect of the die. And after you take the effect of the die, then you can actually potentially play all those cards that you drafted. Now, what are the effects of the die? There's different things on each of them. If you, excuse me for one moment. Okay, if you ever see the star symbol, first off, I should mention that you get everything on the face of the die that you chose, not just one. So, if you see a star symbol, that indicates summoning gauge. You'll immediately move your cube up on your own summoning gauge by 1. If you see a particular symbol, whether an energy symbol, whether it's fire for here, or whether it's earth, or whether it's the feather indicating the wind symbol, and so on, you're going to take that amount of energy tokens. And it's possible there'll be more than one. So here we see 2 water. So you'll get this for this side, you'll get a summoning gauge, and you'll get a fire token, and so on. So if you see a number, whether it's a 1 together with other tokens, or whether it's a 6 by itself like this, that indicates crystals. You immediately move your token up that many crystals on the crystal track. If you see a circle encompassing the entire face of the die, that is transmutation that I alluded to earlier. When you transmute, that means you have the ability, the option to take tokens from your reserve that you've accumulated before and transmute them into crystals on the crystal track. And what you get for those energy tokens depends on what season you're in. That's what all this stuff in the inner ring is. So if you're in winter, you can transmute water or wind, but you will only get one crystal for each of those, because water and wind is sort of plentiful in winter. You don't get that much energy for it. But fire is harder to come by in winter, so that's going to be worth 2. And for whatever reason, earth is very hard to come by in winter, so you're going to get 3 for that. So a lot of the game is deciding when you want to get rid of energy tokens that aren't doing you that much good and turn them in for crystals, but do it at the most profitable time for you. So having that side of the die is going to let you do that. Now, there is, I'm sorry, I almost forgot. There is the card draw. That's what this symbol is. You take this die, you're going to be able to draw a card from the top of the deck. Remember that I said that one of the bonuses you can get on your wizard board is going to let you draw more than one and pick the one that you want. So the only thing I believe that I'm forgetting, or that I haven't mentioned yet, is these little pips at the bottom. Now, these aren't actually an ability that you're going to take. What's going to happen is every player is going to take a die, and because there's one more die than the number of players, there will be one die left. That die is going to go back near the board, and whatever die that is, at the end of the round, after every player has taken the effect of their die, played any cards that they want and paid for them, and used whatever the effects are, the season track, the little black cube on the outer ring, is going to move according to the number of pips that are left on the die that was not chosen. So if this was the die that was not chosen, this is the face that is showing, it will move forward 2. Why this is relevant is because sometimes you want the seasons to move very fast. Sometimes you don't. So whoever has the last pick has another little bit of decision making. If they have the choice between a die that shows a 2 or a die that shows a 1 or perhaps even a 3, it goes from 1 to 3. How fast do you want that season track to go? If you don't care which die you choose, which one do you choose for the sake of speeding up the game? A lot of times, some of the cards are going to give you special effects if you move from one season to the next, and perhaps you want that to happen right away, so you want the season track to go faster. But here's one thing that I haven't mentioned yet. At the end of the 3rd year, once you go through a whole year, you actually gain access to the 3 cards that you have for that year, and play continues. It just, nothing really changes that drastically. But once you get to the end of the 3rd year and the season track passes back to winter for the final time, any cards that you were unable to cast for whatever reason at the end of the game, each one of them is worth -5 points. So that's another reason why you might want to slow the game down in the last year, just to give yourself more time to cast those cards if you need more time to accrue resources. So there's a lot of back and forth in this game of deciding decision making and what you want to do and how you want to do it. So like I said, at the end of the game, you'll have your tableau of cards out in front of you, all the different things that you've played, assuming you have the summoning gauge for it. You're going to add up all of the crystals you accumulated, no matter how you did it. You're going to add up all the prestige points of the cards you were actually able to get into play, add them together. Whoever has the highest score is going to be the winner. It's a very tight, very unforgiving game. You need to draft well. You need to be very conscious of the resources you have and how you use them. But that, in a nutshell, is Seasons. What makes Seasons work so well for me, and I'm only speaking for myself, but I have played it with a lot of people who also really enjoy it. It's one of the most popular games in my group. But what makes it work so well for me is that it seems to be sort of the perfect conflux of different elements that I love and different mechanics that I love that I've seen in other games, but they're all together in Seasons and they just work so well. Let's start with a superficial thing, and that's that the components and the artwork of this game are phenomenal. I love the art in this game. You can make an argument that Seasons is sort of an abstract game when it comes right down to it, but the artwork and the quality of the dice and the components and the boards and how everything looks really takes your mind away from that and makes you think, even if it's sort of imaginary, that there is a good theme here, because it's just so nice to look at, and it does help you make you think that you're sort of a wizard. I think that Magic the Gathering in its early days had that kind of feeling. I think that if you're into competitive Magic, that feeling kind of goes away, even though the artwork has actually gotten better. But I think in Seasons, it's that artwork still helps bring it home to be a little more of a thematic game than most Euro games. And make no mistake, this would fall into the category of Euro game. Nevertheless, the other elements and mechanics of the game make me love it way more than a lot of other Euro games that I've played. And that's another reason why I like it so much, is because it's able to bridge that gap between the sort of heavily thematic Ameritrash games that I tend to love and the really heavy, dry Euro games that I don't. This game is much more accessible and in between, and therefore I think a lot of people, even people who haven't tried it yet, should try it because it's just that accessible to both of those far away camps of people. So what are these mechanics I'm talking about? Well, first and foremost, card drafting. I love card drafting, and it works really well in this game. It's tense, I mean, depending on the number of players, but what I like about it is I would never recommend playing Seven Wonders, one of the other sort of ultimate card drafting games. I'm not a big fan of it, but I like the card drafting aspect of it, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that game with a low amount of players. But Seasons actually excels, regardless of the number of players, with the card drafting aspect. Even with 2 players, you have that sense of tension, like, you know, why any card drafting game is good is because I really need this card, but I don't want my opponent to get this card. And if I let this card go, who's to say that it's going to come back around to me? And yes, there's more tension in that regard in a 3 to 4 player game because you have more opportunities to lose a very valuable card or to give unwittingly other players very valuable cards that they need. But even in a 2-player game, it just works. And I would actually say that one of the problems with Seasons is that it can be a little overlong, especially with 3 or 4 players, because there's a lot of analysis paralysis potential here. But that's another reason why it works really well with 2 players, because you're looking at an hour game with 2 players who know what they're doing. So I'm kind of got off on a tangent from the mechanics, but 2 players works really well for this game. It's one of the reasons why I love it. Other mechanics I like, those dice, so cool. Not just that they look awesome, they're engraved dice, big heavy dice, it's just fun to roll them. But the whole mechanic is very cool because you always have something to do on your turn. It may not be an optimal move, but you'll always have something to do with those dice, whether it's getting points, whether it's getting mana tokens and preparing for another, even if you can't do them now, you're saving up, you're doing other things. You can take those mana tokens and maybe you can transmute on your turn. Lots of different decision making there. Even if you're the last player, you'll have a couple of dice to choose from. And even in there, you have the option of, if I put this die back, this die has to go to the board, which means that the season track is going to go up this many spaces. Do I want it to go that fast? Do I want it to go slower? Do I want to do a slightly suboptimal move which will save us time and make the year go longer? Who knows? I mean, so there's a lot of decision making there. Now, as far as actually using the cards and doing the mechanics of them, it's, you know, the draft is so critical. And it's the one thing, the game has a steep learning curve in that regard. The first couple times you play, you're not going to draft well. Unless you're just an expert at other types of drafting games, the first couple times you play this game, it's definitely going to be trial by fire. Because what you draft, and not just what you draft, but how you lay them out for the 3 years, the 3 cards you put in each year, is so critical. And if you don't do it right, you're going to get totally screwed up. It's in that regard, the game is very unforgiving, because if you need to play cards that are easier for you to actually cast to summon or put out on the board in your tableau in the first couple of years, but you also want to have cards that maybe they're a little harder to cast, like the Hourglass of Time, but over the course of the 3 years, they're going to give you awesome returns as far as mana tokens, crystals, screwing over your opponents. Maybe you want to get that Arcana Leech out as early as possible, even if it doesn't really help you that much, but it's totally screwing over your opponents. So it's good to get that out. You have to make that kind of decision. At the same time, there are cards that are very, very difficult to cast, like the Runic Cube of Aeolus or the Lanterns. Both of those might be in... Well, no, there's one Lantern that's in the base game and one's in expansion. I'm getting them kind of confused. But Lanterns that are a lot of tokens to cast but are worth a lot of points at the end of the game. But you don't want to, quote-unquote, hard cast those, just to use Magic terminology. You want to figure out a way to get those out much easier. And if you can't, at least put them in your 3rd year. But maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you want to go for cheaper cards for all 3 years. That's the sort of decision-making in this game. It's one of the reasons why I like it so much, because you have so many things to keep track of. Now, I will tell you, Because of that, I am not great at this game. I've probably played this game 15 times, not counting the times I've played it online. You can play this game online for free at boardgamearena.net. It's a great way to play it. But out of all those times, I definitely have a losing record. I've definitely gotten better at the game, and my winning record has improved, but I don't know how many times I've lost a game. And I think that's a testament to how much I like it, that, you know, I don't really care that I lose that much, but in other games, losing in a game, especially that can be as long and involved, as stressful as Seasons, makes me not want to really play it, because if I feel like I'm not getting that much better, it's kind of discouraging, but I don't care in this game. I really, really love Seasons regardless of how many times I win, and you kind of have to have that feeling too, because like I said, in the beginning, it's going to be tough for you. You have to figure out how that draft works and how to play optimally and use every single turn to your advantage. Figuring out when to transmute, figuring out when to sit on your tokens, planning out your future rounds, looking at the cards that you have for years 2 and 3, even if you're still in the first segment of year 1, because you have to plan out your rounds. Being able to recognize what's in your opponent's tableaus as well. There's not a ton of interaction in this game, but you need to pay attention to what your opponents have. You cannot just sit on what you have and hope to, you know, some Euro games can feel like solitaire in a sense, because you're just trying to point optimize without paying attention to what your opponents do. But in this case, you definitely need to pay attention. And there are some attack cards, so to speak, that can seriously affect you or your opponent. So you need to be aware of those as well. So I think it's just the right amount of interaction. And that end game, if there's another fault I will say, and again, this is something that will kind of improve for you as you play the game, it's that no matter how much good planning you do for the first 2 years, all of that can unravel based on the cards that your opponents play or suboptimal things that happen to you in the final year, in the final season, if you're not careful. I've had more than one game completely unravel for me in those last couple of seasons of the last year. But that's the game. You need to have set up contingencies and make sure that you've got your tableau out there, that if someone hits you with a card that's going to load up your hands with cards like that stupid owl, that you can actually accommodate for that. I mean, there's just so much going on in the game. It's a complex game. It's a heavy game. It doesn't look like it, especially when you base it off the art and the fact that it's just cards and some cubes and some boards. But it is a heavy game. But it's the kind of heavy game I can really get behind. This game was very formative to me in getting into the hobby, the modern board gaming hobby, hardcore. There's an expansion for it that's also fantastic that I'll probably review separately. There's more expansions on the way. I can't get enough of it. I would recommend this game to anyone who is already hardcore into the hobby, likes heavy Euro games, but can appreciate good artwork and likes nice components, and who likes card drafting. If you like the idea of 7 Wonders, but want it to be even more complex, this might be the game for you. I don't know that I would call this a gateway game for sure. I would never just... I've had a lot of new people come to my group who are not familiar with modern board gaming at all, or designer board gaming, however you want to call it. I would never, ever recommend that they play Seasons. People have made that mistake before in my group, and I'm like... and scared people away. I'm like, why would you do that? That's how heavy this game can be. But once you've played a few gateway games with these people, this is a fantastic game to introduce them to show them how strategic, how complex and thoughtful a modern board game can be. I've probably gushed way too much about this game, but nevertheless, I highly recommend it. It is my current favorite game. It will probably be my top 10 forever, regardless of if it gets dethroned. That is Seasons from Asmodee. Definitely check it out. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, my 100th video, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.